Hello and welcome back to Beckler Guitars and Repairs, and today we're going to be doing a mods and upgrade video on how to install a four-way switch into your Telecaster. So this four-way switch makes your pickups in series or parallel, essentially giving you an option for a humbucker on your Tele. Alright, let's go ahead. Alright, so here's my Telecaster. This is what we'll be using today for the mod. This is a custom built guitar, like a barn caster. It's got the barn door or barn wall top with pine body. I put a custom leather pickguard on there, and it's got some boutique custom built pickups. So essentially what we're going to be doing is we're going to be turning this three-way switch, take it off and put it in a four-way switch. So the advantage of the four-way switch is that actually you have an option to put your pickups in series or parallel, and that's going to give you like an option of a humbucker on the fourth position on your Telecaster. So it'll be back pickup or bridge pickup, middle, neck pickup, and then one more is going to be series, both pickups, so you have a humbucker option. So it's a pretty common mod for Telecasters and pretty useful one too. So we're going to go ahead and do that today. So the first thing I'm going to do is we need to get access to this pickup, and I'll tell you why later. And we need to get access to the cavity. So I'm going to have to take off the strings, take off the pick guard, and take off the cavity. So that's what we're going to do next. Okay, so all the screws are out. So here's my pickup or my cavity control plate. So yeah, I'm going to keep pretty much everything the same here. I'm going to keep the capacitor. It's a nice orange drop capacitor. I got some full size pots here. So the only thing I'm going to be swapping out is the switch. So this is this will all need to be unsoldered and the screws removed, and then I can take that out. So this mod does require some basic soldering knowledge. If you have never soldered before, why not try? It's really not that difficult. You can get a decent soldering iron for, around $60 to $100. I got this one here. It's automatically heats up to whatever degree you want to put it to, and it shows you the heat that you're working with, like what degree you're at in real time. So it works really well. You can also, it also turns off if it hasn't been used for a while, so it's pretty safe. And all soldering is just basically heating up solder, and then heating it up and then reheating it up and then using it on like contact points. So basically it's the solder turns into kind of it melts, and then that's what's holding the wires in place to all these contact points. So it's pretty easy to use. Like I'll show you right now, I've got the soldering iron up to heat already. So here's a super fast like crash course on soldering. So I've got my soldering iron up to temperature, which is 376 degrees. That's the temperature where it makes melting solder with the hot tip very easy. I'm going to put a little bit of solder on the part where I want to put a wire, like so. In this case, it's on the four-way switch on one of the ports, or one of the places where I want one of the contacts. So then I'm going to heat up the solder till it turns into a liquid, and then I'm going to push my wire into place. Now the solder is connected to the wire and the point of contact, and as it dries or cools down and turns into a solid, it's going to stay in place. So it's kind of like welding with a lower temperature metal. And then to remove, anywhere that I want, like any wires, I'm going to heat up that solder again till it turns to liquid, and I'm going to pull on it and it'll come right out. And then that'll dry again, and so that's essentially how soldering works. We're going to be using a diagram for this video, so basically you can download a four-way switch diagram from the internet, just follow it with all the different solder points, and that's how you can solder in a four-way switch into your guitar. It's pretty simple. It does take a little bit of practice, but I believe in you. All right, so the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to wire or solder on that spot onto the pickup cover for my ground wire that's required for this. So I'm just going to put it pretty close to the rest of everything else. I'm just pressing solder against my hot iron until it melts into the place where I want it. So, okay, that's there. Now I'm using push-pull wire for this part, which is kind of like a cloth wire. I use it on guitars a lot of the time, a lot of vintage guitars, but any sort of wire will do. So I'm just going to go ahead and push out the other part so it's exposed. And then I'm going to solder it onto the point on my pickup cover here. So let's just go ahead and do that quickly. Nice. So now I'm going to feed this wire through my cavity on my guitar to get to the other control plate area. So it's already coming through there. Oh, not quite yet. There it is. All right, so there it is out into the control plate. I'm just going to pull that tight. And then I'm going to put my screw back into my pickup. And then I'm actually done with this pickup. I can put the pick guard back on and close everything up and just work in my control cavity. All right, next I'm going to remove my old three-way switch. So I'm just going to take the screws out. And I like to put the screws back into the switch because they're all a little different, and sometimes you can lose these screws and then they're hard to find when you need them. So I just like to keep everything together. Now I'm just going to unsolder all the connected wires for the switch. You can take a picture beforehand or label these wires so you know which pickup they're coming from. In this case, there's different holes routed to each cavity. So it's really easy for me to keep track of which wire is what. So just a good practice to do that though, if it's not easy to determine. And actually, if you don't want to solder or unsolder everything, you could snip it, and then but I find it's a little easier just to unsolder it because then you have your wires already tinned, meaning they have a little bit of solder on them. And they're just easier to work with. And you don't have to expose the wires again and make them shorter or anything else like that. But if you have to cut, you can cut. All right, so there's the old switch. And we're just gonna throw in the new one. Just a couple screws. So in the wiring diagram, there's some spots on the four-way switch where you have to bridge the contacts. So I just made 3 little bridges here, which is basically just a small length of wire with 2 exposed ends that I can solder into place. I just had those ready to start with, so we can do that part easily. We'll do that now. Okay, so I've soldered my bridges on there, and I'm just going to follow the diagram to do the rest. That's basically it. It's just a handful of wires that need to be moved around into certain places, and then we'll be good to restring it and try it out. All right, here we are all finished. So this is all wired up according to the diagram that I found online. When you're done wiring, soldering, you want to check every little contact point where you solder just to make sure everything's sticking and has a good connection. And the next thing to do is just put everything else back together. And what I like to do is before I screw everything down or put the strings back on or stuff like that, I like to test it just to make sure everything's working as it should. That way you don't have that many steps to go back and redo anything if it needs to be redone. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. So we're just going to test the pickup, so like a screwdriver or something, just to make sure everything's working as it should before we put everything back together. So here is the back pickup. Volume works. Tone works. And then all right, so it's a couple days later than that last segment, and it's been a bit of a journey. So I just want to go over it quick with you. So I had everything wired up and I plugged everything in, and it just was not working properly. So in this position, the neck was not working, or it was very faint, and then I was getting nothing in this position. So I rewired the whole thing like 4 or 5 times in different configurations that I found online, and nothing was working. So I thought maybe I had a faulty switch, because I did buy a cheaper switch on Amazon, a 4-way. So I thought the switch was faulty, so I went and ordered a fender switch, which is in there right now. And then I followed this wiring diagram, which came with the switch, which is very similar to what I was doing before. I think the capacitor was in a different spot. Anyway, so I wired that all up and it still wasn't working. So I just want to tell you where I went wrong. So in the other video, I showed putting a solder point on the cover. So that you shouldn't do that. On the back of the pickup, there's a little bit of a jumper cable. So this is just a different pickup. This is just to showing what I mean. So the red or the yellow pickup here is the lead, and this is the ground. There's a little jumper here, if you can see it. Let me see if I can focus. All right, there's a tiny little jumper cable here that goes from the cover, which is behind the 2 wires here on a little tab, and the ground, which is this little solder point here. What you need to do is cut this jumper and then solder it to the back point, a new cord. So the cord that we had wired and soldered to the cover, you don't need to solder it to the cover, you just need to solder it to this little tab here. And it's important that you cut this too. So that's where I went wrong. Another thing I noticed, which is why it wasn't working properly, on the front of the pickup, there's 2 very tiny, thin little strands of wire that come from the wound magnet. So these 2 little copper strands, I had severed one while I was working on it. I don't know if a tool slipped or whatever, but I had to resolder those 2 tiny little parts back together in order to make it work. So, yeah, ultimately this is the wiring diagram I went with, which came with the switch. You can either pause the screen and take a screenshot, or I can take a picture of this and upload it in the, or send a link to it in the description. So yeah. Okay, so now it's been tested. So I'll just show you briefly how I tested that. So I'm just going through an acoustic amplifier, and this is just to quickly test to make sure everything's wired up correctly. So the positions are, in the first position, this is the bridge, and the second position, it's the neck and the bridge in parallel, so that's just like a standard Telecaster. And the third position is just the neck, and in the fourth position, The bridge and neck pickups are in series, so it's a fatter tone, and that's going to give us that humbucker kind of a sound. So to test that, I'm just going to go ahead on the back pickup. Volume's working, tone's working, and only the bridge is responding. Second position, this should be bridge and neck. And then third position, this is just the neck, so the bridge pickup is not working there. And the fourth position, the bridge and the neck pickup in series. So this is your humbucker configuration. All right, so yeah, it's all working. Finally, took a couple days and a lot of troubleshooting, but that can happen. All right, and I just want to show the pickup readings in each position. So I've got my multimeter hooked up here. And okay, so my bridge position is reading a 10.75. And then this is our middle. So a 4.40. The next one is just the neck. So that's a 7.33. And then the next position is our humbucker position. So yeah, that kind of doubles the output at 17.75. So that just shows everything's working correctly. We're getting the proper readouts. All right, the next step I want to do is plug it into the amplifier so we can hear how it sounds. Okay, so here I am plugged into the Deluxe Reverb reissue. I'm using the Bagheera PS1 Power Soak. I'm using the Toros Servo Boost pedal. And I'm just going to quickly show the difference between, you know, the parallel and series configuration for the two pickups. So, let's turn off my tuner here. So this is just my bridge position here. I'm mostly going to focus on the humbucker position and the middle position so you can hear the difference. But here's my bridge position. I'm just running the amp clean. So there's our middle position. So this is the this is our standard Tele middle position. And then this is our neck. And this is our new position that we just wired in. This is our humbucker position. So yeah, so this is our humbucker. Now this is the old middle position. Humbucker. So you get way more output on the humbucker position and it really fattens it up a little bit. So what's cool about the humbucker position is that if you turn your tone up all the way, it's kind of like a bridge humbucker position, like on a Les Paul. But if you roll down your tone, you can get that neck position sound as well. So. Cool, so yeah, it's kind of like turning this into a Tele and a Les Paul all rolled into one, which is quite neat. All right, now I'm just gonna throw in a little bit of dirt. I've got my Tube Screamer pedal, and I'm gonna turn it on and we'll get some distortion. So I'm gonna start in the humbucker position. Alright, I'm going to switch to the normal position. right, yeah, so really cool. You get that really Les Paul kind of a sound. I'm just gonna roll down the tone a little bit so we can get that neck kind of humbucker sound. I rolled the tone back up here. So yeah, sounds great. So you've got a Tele and a Les Paul rolled into one. All right, thanks for tuning in to Beckler Guitars and Repair. That has been our mods and upgrade segment for the 4-way Tele switch. And yeah, it worked really well. It sounds great. There's a little bit of trouble putting it in. That was my fault. I accidentally hit that one wire and severed it, and yeah, it ended up causing a lot of trouble and time for me, but that's how it goes sometimes when you're doing repairs and upgrades and mods. You'll make mistakes, but hey, just keep going and things will get easier. All right, well, thanks for tuning in, and we're gonna have more for you really soon. Have a great day.